Ethan lived on the streets of a busy city, far away from the fancy houses and shiny cars of the rich. He was only 16, but life had been hard for him ever since his parents passed away. Every day, he searched through trash cans for scraps of food and slept on park benches when it wasn't too cold. Most people didn't notice him, or if they did, they looked away quickly. They saw him as dirty, dangerous, or invisible. But Ethan wasn't any of those things. Beneath his ragged clothes and messy hair, he had a sharp mind and a kind heart. He noticed things others missed. The way someone dropped a wallet carelessly, or how a dog limped across the street needing help. One evening, while rummaging through trash near a wealthy neighborhood, Ethan stumbled upon something unusual. There were leftovers thrown out from the grand mansion nearby, and they seemed off. Something didn't smell right. Curious, Ethan picked up the plate and examined it closely. Mixed into the food was a strange white powder. His stomach tightened. This wasn't normal, and it wasn't safe. Little did Ethan know, this discovery would lead to something bigger than he could have imagined. The next morning, Ethan returned to the same spot near the Harper mansion. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The white powder in the food haunted him. It wasn't sugar or salt. It looked like poison. Hiding behind a row of bushes, Ethan watched the house carefully. Soon enough, Mrs. Harper appeared in the kitchen window. She moved nervously, glancing over her shoulder as if making sure no one was watching. Then she took a small vial from her pocket and poured its contents into a dish prepared for Mr. Harper's dinner. Ethan's heart raced. This wasn't an accident, it was deliberate. He didn't know why Mrs. Harper would do such a thing, but he knew it wasn't right. For hours, Ethan debated what to do. Who would believe a homeless boy? People barely acknowledged his existence, let alone trusted him. But deep down, he knew he couldn't stay silent. Someone's life was in danger. That evening, Mr. Richard Harper arrived home in his luxury car. Dressed in an expensive suit, he walked toward the front door with confidence, unaware of the danger waiting inside. Ethan stepped out from the shadows, his voice trembling but loud enough to catch everyone's attention. "Wait!" Ethan shouted, rushing closer. "Your wife poisoned your food." Everyone froze, including Richard Harper. His security guards immediately blocked Ethan, glaring at him suspiciously. One of them grabbed Ethan's arm roughly. "What nonsense are you spouting, kid?" the guard growled. "He's lying," Mrs. Harper snapped, appearing calm but pale. "This boy is nothing but a troublemaker trying to stir up drama." Ethan struggled against the guard's grip, his eyes locked on Richard. "I'm telling the truth. Check the food. There's poison in it." Richard hesitated. The boy looked desperate, wild-eyed, and unkempt. But there was something about his tone that made Richard pause. Was it possible? Could this homeless boy be telling the truth? Finally, Richard turned to his staff. "Take the food to the lab," he ordered firmly. "Test it immediately." Mrs. Harper paled even more, her hands shaking slightly. No one noticed except Ethan, who stood silently, praying he hadn't risked everything for nothing. The wait felt endless. Ethan sat on the cold marble steps of the Harper mansion, surrounded by suspicious glares from the staff and guards. Mrs. Harper stood nearby, her arms crossed tightly, trying to act calm but failing to hide her unease. Richard paced back and forth, his brow furrowed in thought. Finally, a call came through. The lab technician's voice was clear and urgent. "Mr. Harper, we found traces of cyanide in the food. It's highly toxic, lethal even in small doses." A wave of shock rippled through the room. Richard turned slowly to face his wife, his expression icy. "Explain this," he demanded, holding up his phone with the test results displayed on the screen. Mrs. Harper stammered, her confident mask crumbling. I don't know what you're talking about. This must be some kind of mistake." But no one believed her, not after seeing the evidence. Security detained her while Richard called the police. As officers arrived and began questioning Mrs. Harper, she broke down, confessing everything. She had planned to kill her husband for his fortune, thinking she could get away with it because no one would suspect her. Richard sank into a chair, overwhelmed. He had been moments away from eating that poisoned meal. If not for Ethan's warning, he might already be dead. Turning to the boy still sitting quietly on the steps, Richard walked over and knelt beside him. "You saved my life," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. "How can I ever repay you?" Ethan shrugged, unsure what to say. "I just did what anyone would have done." "No," Richard replied firmly. "Not everyone would have cared enough to speak up. You risked your safety for a stranger. That's bravery." For the first time in years, Ethan felt seen, not as a homeless kid, but as someone who mattered. The next day, Richard Harper kept his promise. He invited Ethan to stay at his mansion temporarily, giving him clean clothes, a warm bed, and 3 solid meals a day, things Ethan hadn't experienced in years. At first, Ethan felt out of place among the luxury and grandeur, but Richard insisted. "You saved my life," Richard said one evening during dinner. "Now let me help you rebuild yours." Over the following weeks, Richard learned more about Ethan's past. The loss of his parents, years spent on the streets, and his quiet determination to survive despite everything. Moved by the boy's resilience, Richard decided to do more than just provide shelter. "I want to give you a chance to start over," Richard told Ethan one afternoon. "What do you want most?" Ethan hesitated, unsure how to answer. For so long, he'd been focused on survival that he hadn't dared to dream beyond tomorrow. But deep down, there was something he'd always wanted: to go to school, learn new things, and make something of himself. "I'd like to study," Ethan admitted softly. "Maybe finish high school, or even go to college someday." Richard smiled warmly. "Then we'll make it happen." He enrolled Ethan in a private school known for helping underprivileged students catch up academically. Tutors worked with him daily, filling gaps in his education while boosting his confidence. Slowly but surely, Ethan began thriving. Meanwhile, Richard launched initiatives to support other homeless individuals in the city. Inspired by Ethan's courage, he opened shelters offering not just food and beds, but also job training programs, counseling services, and scholarships for higher education. "This isn't charity," Richard explained during an interview. "It's investment. People like Ethan remind us that potential exists everywhere. We just need to give it a chance to shine." Ethan became the face of these efforts, sharing his story to inspire others. At events and fundraisers, he spoke passionately about second chances and the importance of compassion. "Sometimes all it takes is one person believing in you," Ethan would say. "That belief changes everything." As the months passed, Ethan grew into a confident young man with big dreams. His grades improved, and teachers praised his dedication. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to hope, not just for survival but for a future full of possibilities. And through it all, Richard stood by him, proving that kindness could transform lives when given the chance. Years later, Ethan stood on a stage in front of hundreds of people, wearing a cap and gown. He had just graduated from college with honors, a feat no one would have predicted when he was rummaging through trash cans to survive. The crowd erupted into applause as he accepted his diploma, but Ethan's eyes were fixed on one person in the audience: Richard Harper. After the ceremony, Richard approached Ethan with tears in his eyes. "I'm so proud of you," he said, pulling him into a hug. "You've come so far." Ethan smiled, his voice thick with emotion. "None of this would have been possible without you. You gave me a second chance at life." But Ethan didn't stop there. Determined to pay forward the kindness Richard had shown him, he dedicated his career to helping others like himself. He founded a nonprofit organization called Second Chances Initiative, aimed at providing resources and support for homeless individuals seeking education and employment opportunities. The program grew quickly, partnering with schools, businesses, and local shelters. Former beneficiaries became mentors, volunteers, and leaders within their communities. One of them, a young woman named Mia who had once lived on the streets, credited Ethan for changing her life. "If Ethan hadn't believed in me, I wouldn't be here today," Mia said during an interview. "He reminded me that everyone deserves a chance to succeed." Richard continued supporting Ethan's work, expanding his own foundation to include housing projects, healthcare clinics, and job training centers across the country. Together, they proved that collaboration between wealth and compassion could create lasting change. Their efforts inspired countless others. Businesses began offering internships to underserved youth. Schools provided scholarships for students overcoming adversity, and communities rallied around those in need. Even strangers started small acts of kindness, offering meals, donating clothes, or simply taking time to listen. One evening, as Ethan walked through the same park where he used to sleep, he paused near a bench. It felt surreal to think about how far he'd come, from a boy fighting for survival to a man dedicated to helping others thrive. As the sun set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Ethan reflected on his journey. Back then, he'd simply wanted to warn a stranger about poisoned food. Now, he saw how deeply connected we all are, and how every act of courage has the power to transform the world. For Ethan, this wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about proving that even those society overlooks can make a difference. By choosing to speak up, he hadn't just saved a life. He'd ignited a movement that would benefit thousands. And as long as there were people willing to care for others, the ripple effect would continue spreading, touching hearts and changing lives one act of compassion at a time. Years later, Ethan returned to the park where his journey began. Now a successful advocate for the homeless and underprivileged, he often visited this spot to remind himself of how far he'd come, and how much farther there was still to go. The bench where he used to sleep had been replaced by a plaque that read, "Hope starts here." Beneath it was an inscription, dedicated to Ethan Meyer, whose courage reminded us that heroes aren't defined by their appearance but by their actions. Ethan smiled softly as he traced the words with his fingers. He thought about the boy he used to be, the one who had shouted at a millionaire outside a mansion, risking ridicule and rejection to save a life. Back then, he hadn't expected anything in return. All he wanted was to do what was right. Richard joined him at the park that afternoon, now older but still full of energy. Together, they watched children play on swings nearby while volunteers handed out food and blankets to those in need. Richard's foundation had grown into a nationwide movement, thanks in large part to Ethan's leadership. "You've built something incredible here," Richard said, gesturing toward the bustling scene. "We both did," Ethan replied. "This isn't mine. It belongs to everyone who dared to believe." Their bond remained unshakable over the years, a partnership rooted in mutual respect and gratitude. Richard often joked that Ethan had saved more than just his life. He'd saved his soul. And Ethan credited Richard for showing him that kindness could heal wounds deeper than hunger or loneliness. That evening, during a quiet moment alone, Ethan sat on the edge of the fountain where he once washed his face in freezing water. He looked around at the community thriving before him. Families laughing, volunteers working together, and former homeless individuals rebuilding their lives. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. He remembered Mrs. Harper's trial and how her greed had nearly cost Richard everything. But instead of bitterness, Richard chose forgiveness, using the experience to fuel his mission of helping others. That choice had inspired Ethan to do the same, to focus not on anger or pain but on creating opportunities for those without hope. As the stars twinkled above, Ethan realized something profound. Heroes don't wear capes or suits. They wear whatever clothes they have, torn or otherwise. What truly matters is the size of their heart and the courage to act when no one else will. For Ethan, life wasn't about escaping poverty or proving doubters wrong. It was about showing the world that even those society dismisses can change lives, including their own. His story wasn't unique. It was universal. A reminder that every person has value, every voice deserves to be heard, and every act of kindness creates ripples that extend far beyond what we can see. And so, Ethan kept moving forward, not just as a graduate, advocate, or leader, but as a symbol of hope for anyone who felt invisible. Because when we lift each other up, we rise higher than we ever thought possible. Ethan's story is a powerful reminder that even the smallest acts of courage and kindness can create ripples of positive change, touching lives far beyond what we might imagine. Whether it's speaking up when no one else will, offering help to someone in need, or simply believing in someone who feels invisible, every action matters. And now it's your turn to be part of this movement. Think about the people in your life who have inspired you with their bravery or compassion. Maybe it was a teacher who believed in you when you doubted yourself, a neighbor who shared food during tough times, or a stranger whose selflessness restored your faith in humanity. These moments shape us. They remind us of our shared humanity and the incredible impact we can have on each other's lives. So here's how you can keep the ripple effect going. Start small but meaningful. You don't need grand gestures to make a difference. Sometimes, all it takes is noticing someone struggling and stepping in to help. Offer a meal to someone in need, lend an ear to a friend having a hard day, or volunteer at a local shelter. Acts of kindness, no matter how small, add up to big changes over time. Speak up when it matters. Like Ethan shouting a warning outside the mansion, use your voice to stand up for what's right, even if it feels uncomfortable. If you see something wrong, say something. Advocate for those who may not have the strength or platform to speak for themselves. Courage isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's as quiet as saying, "I'm here for you." Invest in others' potential. Richard Harper changed Ethan's life by believing in him when no one else did. Who in your life could benefit from your support? Mentor a young person, sponsor a student's education, or encourage someone chasing their dreams. A little belief can go a long way in helping someone realize their potential. Challenge stereotypes. Too often, society judges people based on appearances, like dismissing Ethan because he was homeless. Break that cycle by looking beyond surface-level differences. Treat everyone with dignity and respect, regardless of their circumstances. Remember, heroes come in all forms, and you never know whose actions might save a life. Share the story. Stories like Ethan's remind us that ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things. Share this tale with friends, family, coworkers, or online communities. Inspire others to reflect on the power of kindness and courage. You never know who might need to hear this message today. Get involved locally. Look around your community. What needs fixing? Is there a shelter that could use volunteers? Could you organize a clothing drive or raise funds for a local nonprofit? Even small efforts add up to meaningful impact when we work together. Believe in second chances. Everyone deserves a chance to rebuild their life, just as Ethan did. Support programs that provide opportunities for underserved individuals, whether through education, job training, or housing initiatives. By investing in others, you're creating a brighter future for everyone.